the Grand Ole Opry stars. So he booked Elvis with acts, you know. At that time, Elvis's manager was named Bob Neal. He was a disc jockey there in Memphis. So Elvis got to liking the Colonel, and the Colonel got to liking him. So that's where it started.
August 1977. Vernon Presley sat in a Memphis hospital room, watching his son Elvis take his final breath. In that moment, he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He would take 3 devastating secrets to his grave. Secrets that would destroy everything the world believed about Elvis and Priscilla's marriage. But Vernon Presley didn't take those secrets to his grave. In 1979, 2 years after Elvis died, Vernon broke his silence in a series of recorded interviews that were sealed and hidden away for decades. Those recordings have finally surfaced. And what they reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about the King's marriage. For 45 years, we've been sold a lie. The story of Elvis and Priscilla's divorce has been sanitized, romanticized, and packaged for public consumption. We've been told it was about infidelity, about the pressures of fame, about 2 people who simply grew apart. But that's not the real story. That's not even close to the real story. Vernon Presley knew the truth. He lived it. He watched it destroy his son from the inside out. And in those final interviews, he revealed 3 secrets so explosive, so devastating, that they were locked away to protect not just Elvis's legacy, but the people who were still alive to be hurt by them. The first secret? Elvis's addiction wasn't what you think it was. Yes, he took prescription drugs, but that was just the surface. The real addiction was far more dangerous, far more shameful, and it had nothing to do with pills. It had everything to do with what those pills allowed him to escape from. A marriage that had become his living hell. The second secret? Priscilla's affair with Mike Stone wasn't her first betrayal. It wasn't even her worst betrayal. Vernon reveals a pattern of infidelity that started years before anyone suspected, involving people so close to Elvis that the truth would have destroyed him completely. People he trusted, people he called family, people who smiled to his face while stabbing him in the back. But the third secret is the one that broke Elvis Presley's heart so completely that he never recovered. It's the secret that explains why Elvis, despite all his fame and fortune, died alone and broken at 42 years old. It's the secret that explains why he could never trust another woman, why he could never love again, why he spent his final years as a shell of the man he once was. Vernon's voice shakes in those recordings when he talks about this third secret. You can hear the pain, the regret, the weight of carrying this knowledge for so long. He says he should have told Elvis sooner. He says he should have protected his son better. He says the guilt of keeping quiet was eating him alive. But here's what makes these revelations even more shocking. Vernon didn't just know about these betrayals. He witnessed them. He caught Priscilla in situations that would make your blood boil. He saw Elvis's so-called friends laughing behind his back. He watched his son's marriage crumble in real time, knowing truths that would have changed everything if Elvis had known them. The world painted Priscilla as the long-suffering wife, the innocent victim of Elvis's wild lifestyle. They painted Elvis as the unfaithful husband who couldn't settle down. But Vernon's revelations flip that narrative completely upside down. They reveal a web of deception, betrayal, and cruelty that goes far deeper than anyone imagined. These weren't just marriage problems. This wasn't just Hollywood drama. This was a systematic destruction of a man's soul, carried out by the people he loved most. And Vernon Presley watched it happen, knowing that speaking up would destroy his son's world, but staying silent was destroying his son's heart. The question isn't whether these secrets should have stayed buried. The question is whether Elvis Presley would still be alive today if he had known the truth from the beginning. Because according to his father, the lies didn't just end Elvis's marriage, they ended his life. What Vernon reveals in these recordings will change everything you think you know about the king of rock and roll. It will change how you see Priscilla. It will change how you see the people around Elvis. And it will change how you see the tragic end of one of music's greatest legends. The truth has been hidden for 45 years, but truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep you bury it. Vernon's first revelation in those sealed recordings will destroy everything you thought you knew about Elvis's prescription drug problem. Yes, Elvis took pills, but that wasn't his real addiction. His real addiction was escape from a marriage that had become a prison, escape from a wife who had become a stranger, escape from a life that looked perfect on the outside but was rotting from the inside. People think Elvis was addicted to pills, Vernon says in the recordings, his voice heavy with pain. But the pills were just the method. What he was really addicted to was not being present, not being there, not having to face what his marriage had become. Here's what Vernon reveals. Elvis didn't just take drugs to get high. He took them strategically, deliberately, to avoid intimate moments with Priscilla. When she wanted to talk, he'd disappear into his bathroom for hours. When she tried to connect with him emotionally, he'd suddenly need to take something for his back, his headaches, his nerves. The pills weren't recreational. They were a wall he built between himself and his wife. But it gets worse. Vernon reveals that Elvis's so-called treatments weren't treatments at all. Those mysterious trips to different doctors, those private sessions that Priscilla wasn't allowed to attend, Elvis was using them as excuses to get away from her. He'd tell Priscilla he was getting help, but he was actually hiding in hotel rooms, sometimes for days at a time, just to avoid coming home. I'd find him in some motel room outside Memphis, Vernon recalls, sitting there in the dark, not even high, just sitting there because he couldn't face going back to Graceland. He'd look at me with these hollow eyes and say, "Daddy, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend anymore." The most devastating part? Priscilla knew exactly what was happening. She knew Elvis was avoiding her. She knew the treatments were fake. She knew he was using drugs to escape their marriage. But instead of confronting the real issues, instead of fighting for their relationship, she played along with the charade. Vernon's voice cracks when he describes finding Elvis after one of his longest disappearances. 3 days, he says. 3 whole days, and Priscilla never even called to ask where he was. When I finally found him, he was barely coherent. Not from the drugs, but from the pain of knowing that his own wife didn't care enough to come looking for him. But here's the part that will shock you the most. Elvis's overdose attempts weren't accidental. They were cries for help that Priscilla completely ignored. Vernon reveals that there were multiple incidents where Elvis took too many pills, not to die, but to see if anyone would notice, to see if Priscilla would care. The first time it happened, Vernon says, I rushed him to the hospital. When we got back to Graceland, I expected Priscilla to be there, worried sick, ready to help him get better, but she wasn't even home. She was out shopping. When she finally came back, she asked if we'd figured out what was wrong with the television in the living room. She didn't even ask about Elvis. The addiction escalated because the marriage deteriorated. Every time Priscilla showed indifference, Elvis went deeper into his chemical escape. Every time she chose to look the other way instead of fight for their relationship, Elvis took more pills. It became a vicious cycle where his addiction to avoidance fed her emotional distance, and her emotional distance fed his need to disappear. Vernon reveals that Elvis would sometimes flush entire bottles of pills down the toilet, not because he was getting clean, but because he was testing himself, testing whether he could face reality without the chemical buffer. But reality was Priscilla's coldness. Reality was coming home to a wife who treated him like a stranger. Reality was sleeping next to someone who felt like a million miles away. I watched my son become a ghost in his own home, Vernon says. He'd wander those halls at Graceland like he was haunting the place, taking pills not to feel good, but to feel nothing. Because feeling nothing was better than feeling how alone he was in his own marriage. The worst part? Elvis's drug problem could have been solved overnight if Priscilla had shown him even a fraction of the love and attention she was showing other men. But she didn't. She let him sink deeper into his addiction while she pursued her own interests, her own relationships, her own life, completely separate from her husband. Vernon's revelation is clear. Elvis's addiction wasn't a disease. It was a symptom of a marriage that was killing him slowly, one pill at a time. The Mike Stone affair was just the tip of the iceberg. Vernon's second revelation will make your blood boil because it exposes a pattern of betrayal that started years before anyone knew, involving people so close to Elvis that the truth would have destroyed him completely. Everyone thinks Mike Stone was Priscilla's first affair, Vernon says in the recordings, his voice filled with disgust. But I caught her with other men years before she ever met that karate instructor. Men who were supposed to be Elvis's friends. Men who ate at our table, who Elvis trusted with his life. The first affair Vernon witnessed happened in 1968, just 1 year after Elvis and Priscilla got married. I came back to Graceland early from a business trip, Vernon reveals. I walked into the house and heard voices upstairs. I thought it was Elvis, but Elvis was in Hollywood filming. When I went to investigate, I found Priscilla with one of Elvis's bodyguards in the master bedroom. But here's the part that will shock you. Vernon didn't tell Elvis immediately. He confronted Priscilla instead, hoping she'd end it and never hurt his son. She looked me dead in the eye, Vernon recalls, and told me if I said anything to Elvis, she'd destroy his career. She said she had information about his prescription drug use that could ruin him. She was blackmailing me with my own son's secrets. The affairs continued. Vernon reveals he caught Priscilla multiple times over the years with different men. Members of Elvis's inner circle, musicians who worked with him, even family friends who would smile at Elvis's face while betraying him behind his back. There was this one Christmas, Vernon says, his voice breaking. Elvis was so happy, talking about how perfect his life was, how lucky he was to have Priscilla. That same night I found her in the garage with his cousin, his own cousin. The betrayal was everywhere, and I was carrying all of it, alone. But the ultimate betrayal, the one that Vernon says destroyed Elvis's ability to ever trust again, was something so devastating that Vernon can barely speak about it in the recordings. In 1971, Priscilla became pregnant, not with Elvis's child, but with the child of one of her affairs. She came to me in a panic, Vernon reveals. She was pregnant, and she knew it couldn't be Elvis's because they hadn't been intimate in months. She begged me to help her figure out what to do. I told her she had to tell Elvis the truth, but she refused. Instead, Priscilla told Elvis she'd had a miscarriage. Elvis was heartbroken, Vernon says. He wanted more children so badly. He cried for days thinking he'd lost a baby. But there was no miscarriage. There was an abortion, and Elvis never knew the truth. The worst part? Elvis blamed himself for the supposed miscarriage. He thought his drug use had somehow caused it. He carried that guilt for years, while Priscilla let him believe it was his fault. I watched my son torture himself over losing a baby that was never his, Vernon says. I watched him change his whole lifestyle, trying to be healthier, trying to be a better husband, all because he thought he was responsible for something that never happened. Meanwhile, Priscilla was already planning her next affair. Vernon reveals that he kept detailed records of Priscilla's betrayals, not to use against her, but to protect Elvis if she ever tried to destroy him. I had dates, times, witnesses, he says. I had enough evidence to prove she was unfaithful dozens of times, but I never used it because I knew it would kill Elvis to know the truth. The Mike Stone affair was just the final straw, the one that became public. But by then, Elvis had been living with a woman who had been betraying him for years. She didn't just cheat on him, Vernon says. She systematically destroyed his ability to trust anyone. She made him question every friendship, every relationship, every person who claimed to care about him. The question isn't why Elvis and Priscilla got divorced. The question is how Elvis survived being married to someone who was destroying him from the inside out for 6 years. Vernon's final revelation is the most devastating of all, because it explains why Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, died alone and broken at just 42 years old. 3 weeks before the divorce was finalized in 1973, Elvis discovered everything. Every affair, every lie, every betrayal, and the knowledge destroyed him completely. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," Vernon says in the recordings, his voice filled with regret. "I thought I was protecting Elvis by keeping Priscilla's secrets, but I was actually killing him slowly. When he finally found out the truth, it was like watching a man's soul die right in front of you." How did Elvis find out? Vernon reveals that one of Priscilla's affair partners came forward, consumed by guilt. He couldn't live with what he'd done, Vernon explains. He told Elvis everything, not just about his own involvement, but about all the others. He gave Elvis a list of names, dates, places. He told him about the pregnancy, about the abortion, about how long it had all been going on. Elvis's reaction wasn't anger. It was complete and total devastation. "I expected him to rage, to throw things, to demand revenge," Vernon recalls. Instead, he just sat there in complete silence for 3 hours. Then he looked at me and said, "Daddy, how many people knew?" When I couldn't answer, he knew I'd been keeping the secrets too. That betrayal, his own father's silence, broke something in Elvis that never healed. He felt like everyone in his life had conspired against him, Vernon says. His wife, his friends, his bodyguards, even his own father. He told me he didn't know who he could trust anymore. And the truth is, he never trusted anyone again. The divorce proceedings that followed were brutal. Elvis knew everything, but he couldn't say anything publicly because it would have destroyed his image and his career. He had to sit there and let the world think he was the bad husband, Vernon reveals. He had to let them paint him as the unfaithful one, while knowing the truth was the complete opposite. But the worst part came after the divorce. Elvis's relationship with his daughter Lisa Marie was poisoned by what he knew about her mother. He loved that little girl more than life itself, Vernon says. But every time he looked at her, he wondered what other lies Priscilla had told. He was terrified that Lisa Marie would grow up to be just like her mother. Elvis became paranoid about everyone around him. He'd test people's loyalty constantly, setting up elaborate scenarios to see if they would betray him. He'd tell different people different secrets, Vernon explains, then wait to see if the information got back. The prescription drug use escalated dramatically after the divorce, but now Vernon reveals the real reason why. It wasn't just about avoiding pain anymore, he says. It was about avoiding consciousness. Elvis didn't want to be awake, because being awake meant remembering what had been done to him. Vernon's voice breaks when he describes Elvis's final years. He'd call me at 3 a.m, crying, asking me why I didn't protect him. He'd say, "Daddy, if you had told me the truth from the beginning, I could have saved myself." He was right. If I had been honest with him from the start, he might have gotten out of that marriage before it destroyed him. The isolation became complete. Elvis couldn't trust women because of what Priscilla had done. He couldn't trust his friends because so many had betrayed him. He couldn't even trust his own father because of the secrets Vernon had kept. He died surrounded by people, Vernon says, but he was completely alone. Here's Vernon's final revelation. Elvis's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't just an overdose. It was the inevitable result of a man who had been systematically destroyed by the people he loved most. My son didn't die from drugs, Vernon says. He died from a broken heart. He died from betrayal. He died because the people who were supposed to protect him failed him completely. Vernon's final words in the recordings are haunting. I should have told him the truth from the beginning. I should have protected him from her. I should have been the father he needed instead of the coward I was. Elvis didn't just lose his marriage. He lost his ability to believe in love, in loyalty, in family. And that's what killed him. The truth has been hidden for 45 years, but now you know what really destroyed the king of rock and roll. Vernon's secrets have finally been revealed after 45 years of silence. Should he have told Elvis the truth from the beginning? Would the king still be alive today if he had known? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story shocked you as much as it shocked me, hit that subscribe button for more hidden truths about your favorite celebrities.